As I was closing up for the night, I thought about all the movies that had been discussed in the spoiler room. That was when the temperature in the room changed. I went to the thermostat and it said it was 52 degrees KB. Suddenly I found myself in a maze of movie posters. No matter what direction I went, each path led me back to one actor, Kevin Bacon. That was when it was clear what I had to do. When I snapped out of it, I added bacon to the menu. 2020 was going to be an interesting year in the spoiler room.
And welcome, my friends, once again. Here we are in the spoiler room. Yes, thank you for journeying down the stairs, pulling up a chair with us to talk films. It is 52 degrees KB temperature in the spoiler room with us all year. And with me tonight is a great crew member, Mr. Ian Simmons, to talk about an interesting film that many people, I don't think, realize was directed by who it was directed by. But first, Ian, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Glad to have you here with us to talk about The Gift from 2000, directed by, wait for it, Mr. Sam Raimi. And now, would you mind, Ian, giving the synopsis of The Gift?
I would not mind at all. So, well, actually, this is one thing I'm embarrassed. I didn't look this up. Do you remember what state this takes place in? It's a Dixie fried small town southern kind of a tale.
I believe it's in Louisiana.
Louisiana, okay. Well, that checks out. We'll say it's Louisiana.
It's got the bayou. It's Louisiana. It felt like Louisiana. I don't think they fully say which state they're in, but I believe it's in Louisiana.
And you know what? I think you're right. I feel like they didn't actually call out where it is, but you just are supposed to kind of know.
Yeah.
But Cate Blanchett plays Annie Wilson, who is a single mother whose husband died in a work accident, some kind of an explosion the year before, leaving her to raise three young boys. And it's a very small town. Everyone kind of knows each other, knows each other's business. And they also know that Annie Wilson is a psychic, or claims to be. So she gives readings to bring in income in addition to the Social Security from her husband's passing. She reads fortunes off of, this is a bit of trivia that I got from the Amazon pop-up trivia window, which usually is annoying, but in this case, it was very interesting. They're called Zener cards. I think I have that right. Instead of the traditional tarot cards, the Zener cards are used in determining ESP. We saw them at the beginning of Ghostbusters. They've got the shapes like the wavy lines and the squares and the triangles. She uses these to tap into whatever psychic powers that she has to read people's futures, to give them advice. And there's a whole colorful cast of characters in this town that she reads for. One of them is well, she doesn't read this girl's fortune, but she's close to the person who, we'll get into this in a bit. Katie Holmes plays Jessica King, who's the daughter of the rich guy in town. She goes missing, and Annie Wilson believes that something that she suspects foul play. And there's a lot of suspects as to who could have killed this person, because it turns out Jessica King was, to use the unflattering term, the town bike. Everybody's had a ride.
Wow. I haven't heard that in quite some time, but it's not far off for what her character play is. No.
And so Annie is trying to solve the mystery of this death, solve the mystery that pops up after that first mystery has been solved, she believes, and also fighting against a lot of prejudice in the town, plus a lot of secrets that are in the relationships of the people that she reads for. This has a very Stephen King kind of a vibe to it. It's like Stephen King without the crazy monsters or jump scares. It's a wonderful kind of like a psychic ghost story, and it's a beautiful little film. I only saw this twice. I saw it 20 years ago, and then I watched it this morning at like 4 a.m. I started it in the middle of a thunderstorm, which is the perfect atmosphere to watch The Gift.
That actually works for this movie.
Yes. Yeah. So that's kind of what it's about, and we'll talk more specifics, but those are the broad strokes.
Yeah, and I think you put it right. This film wasn't on my radar, which is funny. I'm a big Sam Raimi fan, but when I picked these films to do the connection, I was looking at actors and I didn't really pay attention to directors until I looked at it. I'm like, holy crap, this is a Sam Raimi film because, this is the film he did just before Spider-Man. And in fact, his post-production ran into the production of Spider-Man. So at one point, they were able to negotiate. They were able to negotiate, but apparently at one point, he was working on both films at the same time, starting up Spider-Man and finishing the post on this because this is back in early 2000s to where they didn't crank out a movie in 18 months, So I was reading up the trivia on that, and apparently, he was hired to direct Spider-Man, but yeah, the post-production for this film, so they were able to work it out with the two studios, and so he got time to work on this film and complete it while starting to work on Spider-Man, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Considering how different the two films are.
I could see Sam Raimi taking on something like that, because he was an indie film guy, so he's used to like doing a billion things at once. So I think probably having a lot of money to play around with, at least in one of those sandboxes, certainly helped. So it wasn't like doing everything completely threadbare. One of the nice Spider-Man connections I had forgotten about, or two of them actually, was that Rosemary Harris and J.K. Simmons show up in The Gift. They end up being in Spider-Man as Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson.
Yup. They show up later, and we've got a number of rather surprised kids. I was just looking at single connections, for when I was linking all these films via 6 Degrees. So I didn't really pay attention to the rest of the cast list. And I'm looking at this cast list as I'm watching the film. And I'm like, holy crap, the people in this movie. And you were right. It's this, I fell in love with this movie, but it's just this small, fairly, straightforward, but really, I thought, well-crafted story and what helps is all of this talent. First, Cate Blanchett, she's wonderful. I love her and everything.
Yeah. And I'm so used to seeing her now that to see her in this movie from 20 years ago, and she was like 31 years old and just so young looking, and not a hint of that Britishness. She totally sells this Louisiana accent or whatever she's doing. And Raimi's camera loves her, and I love it for that, because she's stunning in this film. And just you really get to see a sense of what she can do as an actress, just with the subtleties of her facial movements in any given scene, because there's a lot of scenes of her getting a vision while she's talking to someone and having to suppress her own reaction to the horrors that she's seeing or the truths that are being revealed to her while keeping it cool in front of someone else. That's hard to pull off, but man, she does it really well here.
Oh, she does. A great example of that is one of the scenes where, as you mentioned, she's a single mom now, a widow, and so she's taking care of a 15-year-old, like an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old or something like that. I mean, they're two young kids, but her oldest is a teenager, and he gets in a lot of trouble because he's having trouble dealing with his dad's death. And she meets up with the counselor, played by, yes, our link to Mystery Men, Greg Kinnear, in here, who plays the counselor, Wayne. And Katie Holmes plays Jessica, plays Wayne's fiance. And you get this wonderful scene where Katie Holmes, where Jessica King kind of is looking down at her, for one, because, as you mentioned, she comes from the rich family of this small town. And she's kind of looking at the psychic kind of down, but she asks, "Oh, do you see a happily ever after for us?" And there's this scene where it's great because you just see dirty bare feet, and there's this slowly rolling pencil. And you're right, her expression that Kate has on her face, it goes through so much in just so much, a little bit of time. And Raimi really frames this and captures all of that from Kate. You could tell, you're right, the camera loved her. The way he shot Annie Wilson. Yeah,
and that scene in particular is the pencil rolls off the desk and slowly falls to the floor, but it bounces in water, and that's when we notice the feet. And it's not one of those bad horror movie things where you see the feet and that just like a quick pan up and it's the Katie Holmes zombie or something like that. It's just the feet. So we're not sure if Annie looked up and saw something horrible that we're not allowed to see, or if she just looked at the feet and she was like, oh, okay, I gotta leave. I can't look up.
Right.
We're not treated to it because possibly she wasn't. It's a great choice. Now there's a lot of jump scares. There's one like the opening 30 seconds with like the thunder flashing and I think the image of Jessica King's body you see really quick. There's some horror movie stuff in here, but it really is sold by the acting. Like later on when we see Jessica King in the bathtub and because it turns out that the killer has been wrong. The wrong person's been accused of her murder, and the spirit won't let Annie rest. So Annie goes into the bathroom. There's water over the floor because it's a big motif. You see Katie Holmes turn, and she's all like disfigured and everything. So Cate Blanchett runs out in the hall, and Katie Holmes is there. It's a flashing thing that we've seen in 100 horror movies, 100 bad ones, but Cate Blanchett looks like she's actually seen a ghost.
Yeah.
When she falls to the floor and she's doing heavy breathing. Like this is Oscar caliber, like scared breathing in, a dumb little horror scene. And that's what makes it better than a dumb little horror scene.
Well, you get a lot of performances like this that are surprising. I mean, holy balls, Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
Oh my God. I loved it. He was scary as hell. You're supposed to not like his character, but your brain is going, wait, that's Keanu. That's holy shit. He plays the abusive husband to the character Hilary Swank's playing. He plays Donnie Barksdale, and his wife Valerie Barksdale is played by Hilary Swank. And his character, you forget a little bit that's actually Keanu. You're like, that's Ted. What the hell?
Yeah.
Because when we first introduced, because we're first see Hilary Swank, who does all, you've got like 3 Academy Award winners in this movie. Okay. And it's just this little crime, supernatural type of thriller. You've got this huge cast and you've got all this talent. And we first see Hilary Swank, who's obviously being abused, and Annie Wilson, while yes, she's a medium, you get the impression that she is pretty much the equivalent of the counselor for the town. Yeah. The psychologist of the town without having the degree or anything, but she's as close as this little town's probably ever going to get to an actual psychologist. Because she's aware of the world of things. And so she's talking to Jessica King and saying, you really should leave the guy. And that, of course, sparks a feud between Annie and asshole Barksdale, who Keanu, he shows up. When he first shows up, he's just angry and he brings it. And you're just like, I literally kind of lost my breath for a second going, whoa.
Yeah, and there's going back to this feels like it's a character straight out of a Stephen King novel, because he's the good old boy. He's protected by the town's law because they all grew up together, and even when Annie goes to a cop later on, the cop's like, he didn't mean it, and I don't think he'd really do that. And, we go hunting together, and he's not that kind of a guy. But there's nothing that Donnie Barksdale won't do to anybody and in front of anybody because he doesn't care. It's there's a typical scene where there's a mom trying to deal with some asshole, but she's got her kids there, and usually it's the kids that deter the guy from like going berserk. Like he's like, I'll come back for you or something. Like, no, he's threatening the children. He's like slapping the mom in front of the children. He punches Annie in the stomach in front of the sheriff later on during an investigation. I mean, that was the second. I agree with you. It kind of took my breath away when we first see this character, but it happened again when he comes up. Like nobody restrains the guy. He just comes up and he punches her. And even after that, I think the sheriff draws a gun on him, but it's almost like a formality.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's like, all right, calm down. But we don't see Keanu do a lot of villain roles. I think it was in 2000, the same year this came out, he was in this terrible movie called The Watcher, where he was like a stalker kind of a killer guy.
Yeah.
But watching him in this movie, like there's something about those dead raisin in the middle of a bowl of oatmeal eyes that he gets, that 1,000-yard stare that
Mhm.
just makes him the perfect psychopath. And he's great to watch in this movie.
Well, and it's the way the script is written and the way Raimi directs it. We're first. It helps that you're first introduced to his wife, Valerie,
Mhm.
because folks, I'm not talking about the light bruising that you see on some bruising. She takes her glasses off. She's got a huge freaking shiner, and and she describes what happens to her. You're like, holy crap, this husband of hers is just a total asshole. Why are you still with him? So you get all of this kind of build up already to who he is. So then when he shows up, and at first he's calm, but he shows up and Annie's very reluctant to let him in the house. And
Yeah.
and he does this wonderful thing to where you could tell the anger's percolating, but he's keeping it calm, and Keanu plays it so well. And then he gets to the mobile of her kid and he just starts tapping it, and you just feel that tension build with each tap. And it's just, I'm sitting here going, why haven't I watched this movie until now? I mean, again, it's not breaking new ground, but what it does is just so much and so entertaining.
And that's, yeah. And I was thinking about this as I was watching it. This is, a few bad performances away from being a kind of a bad movie,
Mhm.
because if you look at the outline of this, I keep bringing up Stephen King, but it's that kind of a deal where it's the small town vibe, and you're going to get every kind of social problem that you want to ascribe to the South in this movie.
Right.
You've got the spousal abuse. You've got the corruption of the sheriff's department or the local cops. You've got the incest, which comes into play with Giovanni Ribisi's character.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's like one more storyline, but it's like, of course this is going on.
Mhm.
If you look at any regular town, yeah, maybe this stuff is going on, but it's not all going to converge in the life story of like one person. It's not like
Right.
one person is necessarily going to know people with all these other weird problems.
Mhm.
But that being said, there are some, it's a solid story, and there's some great acting in here. So it wasn't until the thing was almost over, I'm like, it's a little bit too convenient. I don't think
Yeah.
we've mentioned who co-wrote this screenplay.
Mm.
Billy Bob Thornton,
Yeah.
of all people. Yeah.
Apparently based off of his mom's own reputed psychic abilities.
Wow.
That's what I read up on the trivia, that apparently it's based off of that, which kind of
Hmm.
like, wow, okay.
He's a fascinating dude. I don't know if he was also in a band called the Box Masters,
Mhm.
and they've done some really cool work. Very very Southern fried. I mean, this
Well, yeah.
movie feels very autobiographical, even though I don't
Mhm.
believe all the stuff that happens in it. It feels like the people who made it believe it.
Yeah, yeah. It really has at least a little bit of grounding, but and again, you're right. If I think with a different cast, this goes direct to video, and you're just like, bleh. But
Yeah.
the fact they have so much talent in here, and people think of Raimi as just the Evil Dead guy, or Spider-Man, but that's the extent. But he's got talent. I mean, before this, what he did a baseball movie with Kevin Costner. What was it called? For the Love of the Game. And before that, he did a film that's really good, and I think is a bit underrated, is A Simple Plan, with
Yeah.
Billy Bob Thornton and Bill Paxton, which is a great film, actually. Another kind of crime type thing. So, Raimi here really does a lot of things. In the film, I made a mention of it in notes. Of course, I always write notes down for these episodes, just full disclosure, and I never end up bringing them to my desk when I'm ready to record. I never do, but I do remember I wrote down that the film doesn't really get Raimi, as you'll say, like into his kind of style. I would say fully until like 48 minutes into it, when we get the full first vision that she has with Katie Holmes' character floating in the water in the tree, and some of the other kind of weird kind of paranormal stuff going on in her visions. It doesn't really until you see, once you see that, you go like, oh, this is a Sam Raimi film, okay, because of his style. But up until then, it's kind of played a little bit straighter than what you might expect from Raimi. But you're engrossed in these characters. It's really the performance of this entire cast. I mean, J.K. Simmons eventually shows up as the sheriff. I loved his sheriff, but I love J.K. Simmons. But
yeah, I do too. I like that he's the skeptic.
mm-hmm.
And he plays it just shy of being a cartoon character.
Yeah.
But when he gets on the stand in the trial of Donnie Barksdale, and was it Michael Jeter? David?
Yeah, Michael Jeter was the
Michael Jeter. Yeah,
yeah.
A lovely job as the kind of bigoted, hard ass prosecutor who's also, again, you turn it a couple of degrees to the left, and he's playing it comedically,
Right.
but he's got this kind of like a small town, small-minded viciousness to the way that he talks to people.
Mm-hmm.
Be it Cate Blanchett's character or even the sheriff, played by J.K. Simmons, that it's kind of menacing, and you see the skeptical sheriff who, up to this point, we really haven't been on his side.
Mm-hmm.
When he gets on the stand, he's being grilled, and he's like, look, I'm just trying to do my job. You don't have to make a big production out of this thing. I don't believe her either, but I'm still, trying to seek justice for this town.
Right.
It's like these lovely little notes that are going on inside of a movie that's full of them.
Yeah, well, and the other note too is the way Simmons plays it through body language in that, and the way he's answering the questions. He's like, look, yeah, I don't exactly believe in the method, but we found the body in the, he's
Right.
a practical guy. He's like, he doesn't really care quite how they got there, but he's like, we went to the pond, we found the body, it was out of his land. It's like, in his world, no, I don't believe in the mumbo jumbo or whatever, but shit, we're at the pond where she told us to go, and there was the body. So, he's dealing with the evidence that's in there, and he really tries to avoid in his answers bringing up anything that would imply that he believed in the mumbo jumbo. But at the same time, you also get that he's like, well, there is evidence though.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Jeter, as the defense attorney, I loved him in this role because it's funny because you're used to kind of seeing him in a little bit more of the goofy roles. And in here, he's a serious hard ass lawyer. And, and again, one beat away from being comic book character, but he's not. He gets just to that point. And
speaking of the court, Gary Cole, who's typically we think of him as like Bill Lumbergh from Office Space or any number of like kind of funny roles. He plays the defense lawyer, David Duncan.
Right.
And when he gets Donnie Barksdale up on the stand, you want to talk about face acting. There is a reaction that is one of my all-time favorites. And it was like Raimi holds on this reaction that Gary Cole has for, I don't know if it's a minute, but it might as well be. I think just to get the nuance of everything that's going on in this guy's head, because we find out earlier that this lawyer, this high-powered guy in the town, is also sleeping with.
He also was sleeping with Jessica King. Yeah,
Jessica King. Because Annie walks in on them, they don't see that she sees, but she knows, and so she understands this connection that they have. It's unclear whether or not David Duncan knows that Donnie Barksdale and Jessica King were actually sleeping together. But when he gets him on the stand and he's trying to do this whole like character witness thing, and where were you on the night of? He's like, oh yeah, I was with Jessica King. Oh really? What were you doing? Oh, I've been seeing her. Oh really? What do you mean seeing her? Well, I've been kind of cheating on my wife. So he's drawing all this stuff out and making Donnie Barksdale look like even more of a piece of shit than he already is, but to the whole community.
Right.
Barksdale is also playing a game in that, yeah, I'm just going to admit that I'm a huge piece of crap, but I'm not such a piece of crap that I'd kill somebody. Like,
Right.
he's really on trial for his life. And it's this beautiful back and forth. But at the point where Donnie Barksdale is asked by David Duncan, why the hell would this rich, attractive young woman be sleeping with the likes of you? And Donnie Barksdale says, well, I asked her that myself once, and she said, you're the only guy in town who knows how to fuck.
Yeah, and the look, you're right.
Gary Cole's expression is, okay, this is confirmation that the girl I was seeing was also sleeping around, and I knew she was sleeping with someone else, but she really is the town bike. Also, you're telling me that she thinks I'm terrible in bed?
There's so much in that, which, yes, we got back to the courtroom again. I apologize. We avoided it for a while, but we're back in a courtroom.
But only for a minute, and it's a really good courtroom scene.
It is. This is actually, again, another one of those nuggets in this film where you're like, this is a really good scene. You've got Keanu, who's, like he's trying to play it cool and be, the cool guy and just be honest. Yep. You know what? As if, after this trial, he's going to go to some counseling. That's the way he's kind of playing it. Yep, I cheated on my wife. Yeah, I do beat my wife. Yep. And then they trigger him enough to go into his rage, which of course is like the nail in the coffin for him as far as any jury's concerned. They're like, oh, yep, because here he suddenly gets triggered and just explodes to calling Annie a witch in court. And you're just like, oh man. But yeah, I just loved that scene. But there's a lot of those scenes in here. I mean, Giovanni Ribisi. When I saw him, I'm like, oh, Ian's gonna love Giovanni Ribisi. it's your guy. And one thing you got to admit, he plays similar characters, but he does it very well. And in this one, he plays the abused, another abusive relationship in here. Buddy Cole. What'd you think of Giovanni Ribisi's character?
I have given Giovanni Ribisi a lot of crap. I think he is a talented actor, but I think when watching a bunch of his movies together from this time period, it's easy to say, oh, okay, yeah, he's gonna flip out now. This is his shtick. But he's really good in this role. And I can't remember, or I can't figure out if the mystery of what Buddy Cole is going through is because I had seen this movie 20 years ago and there's something rattling around the back of my brain, or if it's just so obvious from the way the movie is presented that his dad was, molesting him at a young age, and that's what's kind of turned him all screwy. But he plays it really well, and it's hard to watch in some cases, but it's the hard to watch where I feel like the mania is really serving the story. When he goes up to Donnie in the pickup truck, he's there with his buddy and they're harassing one of Annie's younger sons. Then Donnie's like, you should mind your own business. He's like, oh, I am. And he gets out the crowbar and just goes to town on this truck. And then at the end of this rage spiral, he just kind of like clears his mind. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I think I may have fucked up. He does that a lot in this movie, but it's a really sympathetic character because it's kind of that red herring situation where everybody in town knows each other and that makes everybody in town a suspect.
Right.
And the movie does play around with, oh my God, was it Buddy? Was it Donnie? Was it Valerie, the abused wife that killed, Jessica King because she found out? Like, Greg Kinnear, the fact that, okay, spoilers, he's the murderer is like the most obvious choice. And I feel like if there's one ding on acting I could give, and maybe it's the fault of the direction, it would be Greg Kinnear, because I'm like, oh yeah, he did it. And I think I felt this 20 years ago too. And I almost wish that he had had more time or developed more of a relationship with Annie so that you think, to place him really above that suspicion. But no, back to Giovanni Ribisi. He's a lot of fun to watch, but it's not fun watching him in this movie. I felt really bad for him. Especially that last scene that they have together in the truck is really sweet, where I had forgotten that he was a ghost at that point.
Right.
but he's like, I love you, Annie. You're the hero. This town needs you and everything. At first, I'm like, oh, is he going to put the moves on her? But no, it's this kind of a cosmic message of like, you've had a lot of doubts and a lot of people have getting a lot of shit over the past couple of weeks, but you got to keep going. You got to keep your head up.
Yeah, and this was the first time I watched it, but I kind of suspected he was a ghost just because, one, it's a Raimi film. No offense to Raimi and his reputation, but and two, the way everything was going, I'm like, okay, he's a ghost at the end. But I didn't mind. It's at this point, you're at this point in the film, and the way it's handled and performed, I think it gets a little bit of a pass in some of these things because you don't mind, because it's entertaining to watch these people and the performances. And I kind of suspected he was a ghost, but I like the fact that they were able to get excuse me, Greg Kinnear's character in the trunk. We didn't have any like he suddenly wakes up and there's another fight or whatnot and they end up killing him at the end or whatever. No, they toss him in the trunk and they manage to take him to the cops. The cops actually arrest him. And I was like, I actually kind of liked that because I was fully expecting maybe, the one of those cliche conflicts of, oh, he suddenly woke up and they're fighting and she's going to be forced to kill him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you don't get that in here.
Well, there's one of the themes that's in this film is that kind of the small town hypocrisy. And we see that with Greg Kinnear's character, Wayne. He essentially is Donnie Barksdale. He just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
He's the upstanding school counselor, but he did murder his fiance in a moment of passion. And when he's on that bridge with Annie at the end, and he's like coming clean, he's like, look, I'm not that guy. I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. You believe him because he's not a monster. It's unfortunate. However, you also know that he has that seed within him that if he had married Jessica King, whatever was inside him, that insecurity, that rage would have come out and he would have ended up beating her or worse. So it's not a clear-cut case of a villain. This movie reminded me of The Crucible, which we talked about, that whole small town witch kind of conspiracy thing. And it also reminded me of Stir of Echoes, which we talked about a few weeks ago, which is another great example of a horror movie or a lovely ghost story sort of wrapped up in the accoutrement of a ghost like a regular kind of a ghost thriller.
Right.
But there are no evil spirits. There's just good spirits and kind of mixed up people. The aesthetic is fine because I don't mind some of the jump scares because in Raimi's hands are effective. But at the end of it, I'm like, oh, I didn't watch a horror movie. I watched this really great like ghost love story.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. At the end, I think it's wrong just because Raimi's attached to it to try to, think of this as a horror film. Yes, it's got the supernatural elements into it, but at its core, it's just this dramatic, crime thriller with ghosts in it a bit. It's kind of a ghost love story too with, Buddy Cole's character. And yeah, it's just, I liked the setting, the way it was shot, the way it was handled. And you mentioned before Greg Kinnear's character. I'm not sure if it's the direction or if it was the way he was written that made it kind of obvious, and I don't know if that was maybe intentional, but I think for me, it was maybe the way it was a little bit of both, especially the way his character was written, because even though he's with Jessica King, he warms up pretty quick to Annie Wilson. I mean, when he first meets, and then you see Jessica King, and then makes you wonder, okay, is this one of those where they're a relation of convenience? At first, but then later on, the way Wayne acts, you realize, oh no, he was into her. But up to that point, you're like, wait, they almost seem like they're just a relationship because everybody kind of expects it.
Well, and that's the thing is I don't get, Wayne, he's kind of got a big house. But he works at the school, so he's not necessarily bringing in the big bucks, right? He's not the principal. He's not the superintendent. He's either like a guidance counselor or a teacher or something. But when Jessica is kind of chastising him, she says, the only reason I'm marrying you is because my dad likes you.
Right.
I kind of get the feeling that rich old dad is like, look, everybody knows that you will sleep with anything in town. This is a nice, upstanding guy. Don't fuck this up. You know,
Mhm.
you're gonna marry him. You're gonna behave if you want the inheritance. And this guy also is stupid enough to be in love with you, A, and B, have no idea that you're sleeping with everybody else in town. And so when he finds out about this, maybe that moment of passion was Wayne realizing or admitting to himself that everything that he has suspected is true.
Mhm.
Uh, any number of things could have been going on, but yeah, he's completely unhinged in this moment. The one thing that threw me off, I think, is a bit of a cheat, is if we're not supposed to be onto Wayne as a suspect
Mhm.
after Donnie Barksdale is thrown in jail. Uh, what's her face? Annie goes to visit his house.
Yeah.
And there's newspapers all over the front stoop. She goes in. There's Dos Equis and whiskey everywhere. He's a complete mess. Uh, if he's gotten away scot free,
Mhm.
the wrong guy has been thrown in jail, so he's going to get away with it. Yeah, his fiance's dead, but I don't know if he's going into this spiral downward bender. It almost looks like something that he put on for show to show that he's a really wrecked and devastated man. I feel like there needed to be an extra scene in there or something explaining what was going through his mind. Because I would expect that if he'd gotten away with the crime of the century, he would have been, not that down.
Yeah. Yeah, or if feeling a little guilt with his character, or just putting it on for show. And you're right about the suspicion thing, and if him killing her. I got the impression, even when he first meets Annie Wilson at the party they're at outside of the school environment, and they're actually being social. I got the impression that he kind of suspected that Jessica was running around on him the whole time, but he either was fooling himself that she was, or just, wasn't 100%, but it almost gave the impression that, he kind of did suspect, and that's why he was kind of warming up to Annie. And then, though, when you see his house, you're like, huh, but then you see his house and Annie's there just to check up on him, and he's suddenly throwing on some Isaac Hayes and saying, hey, let's get it on. And you're just like, dude. And he's like, well, you want to, don't you? And she's like, what the fuck? she's like, I think I put the wrong guy in, and that's the thing, is she never actually, even though it's on Donnie Barksdale's land, she is true that she never actually accuses Donnie of killing Jessica King. She suspects it because of the way he is, but at the end, the evidence, she just said where the body was. She didn't actually say Donnie did it.
Right, and I think that's a testament to, again, what the filmmakers are trying to say about this town, is that just because they find a body on someone's property, next thing you know, the guy is automatically on trial. Like, was there any kind of investigation? They say that there's, dozens of swamps and gates around the entire town. Like, who's to say someone didn't kill her and take her body there, or just randomly kill her on the property and just happen to be in his backyard?
Well, they do throw the part in there where he got scratched, because she's got his skin under her nails from the scratch.
And he did lie about that, didn't he? I forgot about that scratch.
And he did lie, saying it was a cat, and it was Katie Holmes. So it begins with a K sound. But no, just kidding.
A cat in heat.
Cat in heat. Yeah, it is Jessica King. So, but so, I mean, they do play it at that. And so, but just the skin under the, nails thing, him fully getting charged for it was a little bit, but again, he's an asshole, so you don't mind him going to jail. I mean, he beat his wife with an inch of his life, so even if he isn't fully guilty of the murder, that's fine. Lock him up. So I mean, you get all these just fun characters, interesting characters, a little cliche, but again, as we mentioned before, with a different cast, this film really doesn't hit. But you've got so much talent in this little film which because it is. I mean, it's not in many locations. It's not a really huge film. It's more of a character film. Um, yeah, it works. I think it works for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to see this. I don't remember how well this did or what kind of a push it got, but I was able to see this in a theater,
Mhm.
20 years ago, and just kind of falling in love with it. I don't know why I haven't gone back in the last 2 decades, because I think it's a small film. It's something that comes out, it makes an impact, and it kind of stays with you. But it's not something you want to necessarily revisit all the time because it
Mm-mm.
is kind of rough in places. It's not the feel good movie of the year, that's for sure.
No, it's not a necessarily a feel good movie of the year, though it doesn't exactly end on a completely bad note either. Though it's kind of a bittersweet moment. It's not completely nihilistic in the end, which is nice. Because I thought for sure they were going to play of, oh, she got hit in the head, now she doesn't have her powers anymore. Um, I was waiting for it. I mean, come on.
She's not an X-Man or whatever.
You know what I mean, though. I was kind of waiting for that, going, oh, now she can't because she got banged in the head hard. But they didn't do that, which thankfully they don't do that. And yeah, it's got a little bittersweet ending, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I was kicking myself for not watching this because I loved all the people in here, and I sometimes like watching character pieces like this, to where, sure, the story plays out and it's a bit predictable, but you're watching this for the characters, for the people and the way they're playing them, and everybody puts their all into it. And it is dark. Yeah, especially when you get to the Buddy Cole character. Can we mention real quick? We mentioned how Jessica King is the daughter of the rich guy in town. There's a little weird exchange that's almost a bit implied, and I don't know if I just read it wrong, when they're at the party in the beginning, and I think it's supposed to be her dad asks her to dance, and she comes up and she's got the one spaghetti strap off the shoulder, and she kind of goes, "Okay, Dad," and the way she walks up to it and even kisses it, I'm just like, I
Yeah,
got a
wasn't it
creepy vibe from.
wasn't it like full on the mouth or something like that?
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was. I don't know if it's like that Southern hospitality thing, but it's strange because they don't do anything with it.
Mm-mm.
And I don't think we see the. Did we see the dad again after the near heart attack in the swamp when they dig out the body? I don't
No,
remember
we don't. We
like on
don't
the
really
trial
see.
or anything.
No, we don't really see him anytime after. I think we get images or glimpses at him of the trial, but we don't really see any more of him after that.
Yeah, so it is creepy, but because they don't really
Mhm.
expand on it, and this is the kind of film where if there is a dark corner to be have light shed on it, I think they would. So I think it's just one of those creepy things, like, I
Right.
love you, Daddy, like give you a big kiss on the mouth, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so it wasn't just me though, getting just a little creepy vibe from that scene.
no, and I think it's I caught it too, but it's just like a quick second, and it's never
Mhm.
mentioned again. I had
Right.
forgotten it until you brought it up.
Oh, well, yeah. So yeah, with the way it is, I mean, because they go somewhere with the Buddy Cole angle, so you would expect something that dark or whatever. They would have brought that up too. But
Well, and honestly, that's the most disturbing part of that whole thing is Buddy keeps mumbling something to Annie about like, I don't want to look at the blue diamond.
oh
And
God,
you're like,
yeah,
and then when you see that it's a blue diamond tattoo on the dad's like
stomach,
pelvic
yeah.
region, yeah, like going right down there to the point where you can imagine where exactly your head would be if you were facing the blue diamond.
Hmm.
It's so gross.
It it is gross, but I mean, it's supposed to be. But yeah, it's so it's very gross when you expect the blue diamond. He keeps referring to it, and you think, okay, it's some kind of object, or you know, uh, I I kind of suspected, but I figured it was more just abuse because this whole film has this kind of underlying theme of exploring various forms of abuse in it. You've got the spousal abuse, you've got the sexual abuse of the kids, you've got, in a kind of inadvertent way, the abuse that Annie receives from the town for her beliefs or her ability by the the extreme Christians of the town, calling her, you know, a witch and that. So you do have kind of that. It's not fully explored, but you do have that angle of abuse as well. So that runs through here. But I thought it was going to be more of just physical abuse. I did not quite expect the sexual angle of abuse for Buddy. And when when you realize that's what's going on, you feel even more for Buddy, and then you're also very skeezed out.
Yeah, and what I liked is that it really is they just show the tattoo for like a second, and then you're left to figure it all out. There's no flashbacks from like his perspective of like dad coming into his room at night. None of that stuff. You get all that in your own head once you see the blue diamond and exactly where it's placed. There's a lot of like nice artsy kind of subtlety of this movie. One thing I wrote down is the first time we see the Gary Cole character, the lawyer. He's in his office. Or the first time we see him is when he's fooling around with Jessica King,
Right.
but when he's really introduced as a character, he's in his office, and immediately behind him is that famous portrait of JFK, kind of like looking contemplative, and they're posed right next to each other. I'm like, this is perfect, because we know that JFK was a handsome, young, powerful guy who had this whole secret life that was a secret from he was like sleeping around with people. He was a big philanderer, and that's what this character is. And so it's like these little set decoration touches that kind of put these subliminal hints into our mind about what we're watching and who we're watching and what that means.
And that's another great scene where you're talking about Cate Blanchett's facial expressions. The minute she walks into the office, it's just like, boom, she knows who he is, and the audience knows what's running through her mind, because you're thinking the same thing the minute you see him. You're like, oh shit, that's the guy in the bathroom, banging Jessica King.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like, oh, here's some random dude. Oh, this is my lawyer. Great.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't know if we knew that he was married until later, because they never bring it up, but when she goes to visit him after Donnie's been locked away, and she just has these other visions, and she's like, okay, we got to reopen this case. She goes to visit his house, and they have this great scene in the library, and they make a point of showing the wedding ring. They don't zoom in on it, but it's very conspicuous on his hand. So yeah, it's just because you're like, oh, he wasn't just cheating with someone who's engaged. He's cheating on his wife with someone who's engaged. Just like this double cross.
It's funny you mentioned the wedding ring, because I do remember making a note. And again, like I said, it's Sam Raimi, and he can do some nuance. And in here, in that scene where she goes with Greg Kinnear's character to Wayne, and he wants to get it on, but all she wants to do is just kind of lay there. So she lays on his chest, and she talks about how in some respects she's still married. And as she says it, she runs her hand through her hair, so you see her wedding band. It's very subtle, but I'm like, that can't be coincidence that she delivers the line thinking that he's, in some respects, he's still there, she's still with him. And as she runs her hand, you realize she's still wearing her wedding band from a year ago when her husband died. When she says she's not quite ready, I'm like, that was on purpose. It had to be, whether or not it was something Kate did, or whether or not it was given direction by Sam Raimi, but it was just a subtle thing. But it's something I noticed, and there's a lot of that in here that just, like you said, the blue diamond, we don't get gratuitous flashbacks on that. We're not exactly addressed that, the prosecutor that she goes to, that she wants to open the case, actually is married, but yet you see the wedding ring. There's a few other mentions too, to where it's not fully shown to you, like, here you go, he's not fully holding your hand, but if you're paying attention, you can put two and two together fairly quick.
Sam Raimi is not known for his subtlety. He's known for the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But when he decides to go to do something kind of like below the line, he really knows how to get it in there. Yeah. I love this movie.
I do too. I fell in love with it watching it. I'm like, I'm kicking myself for not watching it sooner. And I think we'll wrap it up here tonight. It was one of those things where I'm watching this going, yeah, it reminded me a little bit of like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
I've never seen that movie.
No?
No.
Well, and you may never watch it now because it's got Spacey in it, but unfortunately, but that one's also, a good kind of character piece as well. And it kind of had that vibe a little bit with it, but I would not watch it like back to back, but I find myself watching this again in the future. Just I need to space it out for a while because it goes to some dark places that just I was like, okay, you know what? I can only see that so often. But I would still recommend it if you like any of these people and you want to see Keanu in a different light. And this is different than the 2015 movie The Gift, which is completely different.
A little bit, yeah. One last note on Keanu.
Yeah.
It was 3 years after he did The Devil's Advocate, and he really worked on his vocal, with a voice coach, I guess, because in that movie he did this like over the top foghorn leghorn Dixie Pride Southern accent.
Yeah,
that was just so bad, and it's he really pulls it off in this movie. He's pulled it in a bit.
Yeah, you can see how far he's kind of come just over the years, his different roles, and in here he's really hit his stride now, starting with this film, because this is just after The Matrix that he did. Go ahead.
Nice. I wondered about that because I don't know when this was filmed versus The Matrix, but like he was so skinny in The Matrix, so slender, and here it's not that he's fat; he's just beefier. And
he's
I'm like,
beefy, yeah.
Did he do this before he filmed The Matrix, and then he lost all that weight, or did he, like after training so hard for The Matrix, like fuck it, I'm just going for the fried chicken?
Well, he did do The Replacements.
Right.
That same year, and that's where also you said he did you mentioned The Watcher, but he did do The Replacements where he was playing a quarterback. So he may have done this, been shooting around the same time, and that's why he does look a bit beefier in here. He doesn't look overweight or anything, but he does look filled out compared to the way he looked, lean and mean in The Matrix. So that could be part of it too, is that because he had, bulked up a little for The Replacements. I'm not sure, but it is definitely a role you're not quite used to seeing him in a good way, Yeah. He just brings it. He's like, I get to play a bad guy. Whoa.
Well, and it's partially because of what we know of Keanu as a public person. Yeah. He's such a nice, gentle guy. To see him go to this extreme place, it's unsettling. It's like, no, this is wrong to be watching this guy do this, especially to these women. We didn't really talk about when he busted in onto the reading, later in the film, where he just did not care. Like there was someone who wasn't even involved in their drama, like this other lady that Annie was reading to. Like, I don't care. I'll take this inside, outside, however you want to do it. Yeah, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying. He busts in there. I mean, he not only busts in there, he busts in there his jacket. He's got no shirt on. He busts in there. He grabs his wife, drags her, knocks over a can of paint, doesn't care, drags her through the paint. It's a scary moment. I was like,
throws her out the stairs on the front lawn. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, bad stuff. I'm like, whoa. No, give me happy Keanu. I don't like scary Keanu. I really don't. So I think people will gather our final thought on it, but why don't you go ahead? Just give your final thought with this film, and would you recommend it?
Oh, I would totally recommend it. And it's almost a pity that it's a supernatural thriller, because I think if you take out the ghost elements, I could show this movie to my wife.
Does she not like ghost films?
Ever since we had kids, it's just kind of puts her into like mama bear mode. She it's ultra like protective and everything. And, kind of wigged out. And I totally understand that, but I think you take out the supernatural element, you're still left with a cliched story that doesn't feel like a cliche, because there's so much great acting and so many wonderful ideas behind it. But
Mhm.
even with the ghost stuff, it's really effective little thriller. So yeah, 100% recommend it.
And same here. I would recommend it. Seek it out. It's one that it's the type of film. It doesn't have a lot of special effects or anything. Like I said, very character driven, uh, bit cliche, but it ages well. You watch this film, and you forget it's 2000 because the way it's built into a small town and the way the settings are, there it doesn't get placed in a specific time. So you could watch it today, and I think it's still very effective because we've all known that small town. Um, maybe
Yeah, I
not with
mean,
that much of abuse in the same small town, but still that small town environment, we all know it.
well, that's a great point. I mean, this is a very low tech movie. Like, there's
Mhm.
nobody going to a library to look up something like on microfiche or something like that, or there's no need for anybody to have a cell phone. This just isn't that kind of a
Mhm.
movie. So yeah, it is very. This thing is going to be timeless, I think, for a long time.
Yeah. I totally agree. And so I would recommend it to anyone, especially if you're a fan of any of these stars in here, because each one does get a chance to get a scene in here. So yeah, check out The Gift from 2000. It's actually on Amazon Prime right now. So if you have it, it won't even cost you another extra dime. You can just check it out there. So as always, thank you, Ian. Always a pleasure to have you on the show here, sir. And now this is, as always, where we give you the license to shill, sir. So please shill away.
Well, thank you very much for having me as always.
Mhm.
You can find my stuff at Kicking the Seat. That's kickseat.com. I have a podcast that comes out between 2 and 3 times a week. I also have a YouTube channel, which is you go to YouTube and type in Kicking the Seat and you'll find it. So, yeah, please watch the videos, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'm also here just about every week, which is one of the highlights. So yeah, I really love what you're doing here with this. This is a blast as always.
Well, I appreciate it, and yeah, this has been interesting seeing films I probably wouldn't have seen before, and some of them I didn't miss, and some of them like this one I am kicking myself for not watching sooner. So, thank you as always, folks, and I would just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Hey, all my friends out there looking for more spoiler room goodness? Then why don't you check out our brand new Patreon page, patreon.com/specialmarkproductions, where you can get access to exclusive spoiler room episodes and a whole lot more. You can also find us on Facebook groups at SMPRD and on to Twitter at SpecialMarkPro. Let your voice be heard and let us know what you would like to see in the spoiler room, as well as just how we're doing in general. We appreciate your support, and remember, in the spoiler room, the conversation is fresh, but we do spoil the movies.